Hello there, and welcome back to our Orlando time-lapse series. In today's episode, we will construct the pavilion structure directly in front of the railroad station. So let's dive directly into it. So the issue here was that the in-game railroad station for the train has this station attached to it, And since you can't remove that base station of the game itself, I had to take that into account when planning and layouting this railroad station now. And the most obvious drawback that comes with that is that the entry and the exit of the station, where you have this white plastic looking swing door, that I can place that only on the outer contour of the station itself, And in reality, this station platform, it's divided in the middle. So you have on the right side the station itself where you board the train, and on the left side you have like this free space where you can walk upon, where you don't enter this train itself, And now because this in-game station is so thick there, I can't make it 50-50, I can only make it visually 50-50. When you look purely on the gameplay feature here, you have there 75% of the station and then only 25% of the zone where you could actually walk before you enter the station. So I try to hide that, of course, since you don't see the actual path where people walk, and I covered it up with brickwork here. But still, it's pretty fiddly, I think, if you have now to make those paths actually work in game, since you have so many paths there. I talked already about it, You not only have the path under the tunnel, you have the path on the top of the station, then you have the station, then you have the path that is sloped inside those atriums, and at the end, you have so many things there. Even the path that is in the basement under the station itself that is connected to those tunnels, you have so many things there that you could theoretically make work, but still those slopes in the atriums, I think, it's really tricky. As you know, I'm currently in the phase of not only layouting, but actually constructing this central hub of Main Street. And we have this very essential question on how to construct the Main Street itself as a street, Since it's a street, you have not only the part where you have the street, but also the boardwalk, and the boardwalk is slightly elevated. So for that, do we use now the path system and make actually two paths, of which one is elevated slightly? Or are we relying on the simple scenery method, And for now, at least, I stick with the scenery option. At least for now, it makes much more sense, I think. Since we don't need that functionality now, we don't have any guests there, and our park is not operational right now. It's still in construction. Both ways have drawbacks, of course. If you now try to really use the path system there, the most obvious drawback is that you can't remove the curb. And if you can't remove the curb, I have to show it, and it's just there then. Like it's in the game higher than the actual path itself. And in reality, it's not like that. You have your path, and the curb for that path is on the same elevation level. I don't think it's really worth it to invest into that and to make it right now, where we still have the early beginnings also of the game. So we just wait which features they may implement in the future, So the only drawback if you make it out of custom scenery is when you see a guest there, that their shoes are sticking into the ground. And for the Anaheim Park, I used exactly the same method here. It still works, But in the end, we will see how this will work out in the future. The game is not even a month old. It released on 6th November, so today we have the 4th of December. I just feel that at some point they will implement something into the game where it's a lot easier than to make those complex path things, If you would ask me if I care about that, maybe 1 year ago, I would clearly say no, because I was purely interested into the building of it. But if you would ask me now, when I released my park release video, it was just so magically when this park finally worked then, to finally see it come to life. And it's important to not underestimate also this step, It's very crucial, I think, in the end, to make your park also functional. Since this is the big difference between something what you would do in like a 3D application and now doing it in a game where you can actually play it after it. There's a certain fascination, I just think, where you can interact. That is maybe the key thing here, this interactivity, where it's not a static thing, a dead thing that just is there to resemble that, how it looks like in real life, but where you can actually interact with it and play with it. That's the thing, what makes it so special after it. Maybe you know the Miniatur Wunderland in Hamburg, and it's the world's largest model railway. I mean, I was there 2 times, I believe, and it's constantly growing, There are different areas they work on, where each area resembles a country in the world. So it's not only the scenery, but also just the fact that you have there moving cars and buses and trains, of course, and ships and even airplanes. And when you go there, you can basically stroll around through those areas, and everywhere you have like those little interactivity stands, where you can push a button and suddenly something happens there. So it's not only a static thing here, it's again about this interactivity that you can play around with it. And sometimes you have even a fire there, and then the fire brigade is basically rushing to the emergency, So if you have the chance to be in Hamburg, I can remember saying that sentence in a previous episode, but if you have the chance to go to Hamburg, then don't miss the Miniatur Wunderland and also not the Elbphilharmonie. Okay, those 2 spots are a must go, and maybe if you were there, please tell me your experience. I would be curious about that. Hopefully it was great. But yeah, it's again about this fascination of a miniature version of something that is built in reality. And it's pretty much everywhere, this concept, It's not only in video games, it's also in reality, where you have model railways, or where you have like those Lego pieces, where you build also something within this system that is mostly inspired by something that is in reality. Pretty much everywhere you go, you see this motive, And when you think about this perspective, then you kind of have to say that it's pretty economic when you play Planet Coaster then, or you don't have to pay anything else than the base price of the game itself. If I would try to do this project in an analog form, in using Legos or in using a model railway, I would have to spend multiple thousands of dollars to come even close to what we will do in this game, And you need even the space for that. The question is, of course, in which scale you do your park in the end, in reality. But still, if you would do the entire park, you would probably need a full room for that. I can't imagine how much work that would be. And also, I don't know how effective you can document it then and make like those time-lapse videos. So I think we are good to go here and call ourselves lucky here that we have this game, I think this is a little bit overlooked here, that we have this luxury, that we have something that is in a virtual space and where we don't have to care about any of those issues you will encounter if you would decide to do it in an analog fashion. So in the end, it doesn't matter how many DLCs there are, I will buy everything regardless of the price, since it will be much, much lower at the end than those poor folks that have to build it in analog space and spend thousands of dollars there. And they will not even have the version where you have actual people walking in it. You just have like those little puppets, and where we have just much more benefits there and have this true simulation here, you know. So at this point, let's get back to our build. So you see me constructing this pavilion structure here, and I laid especially emphasis. The metal structure underneath this pavilion is there so that you don't have only a little flat surface when you later in the guest cam and you look there and you want to board the train, that you don't only have like a super simple pavilion. It's not only looking good on the exterior, you know, it's also again the interior when you look from a guest perspective. And it's also the thing of the spatial relationship to the railroad station, because it's so near to the railroad station that has a very high detail level. I have to kinda get into the same realm of detailness there, because it's in a close spatial relationship. So for the roof, I used those metal gutters in combination with the art pieces. And I think this gives you a great flexibility, especially on those tight corners where you have to make them really precise. And if you would use like linear pieces that are way bigger than that, you don't get this exact edge where they met. And also the metal look on those gutter pieces, I think, are very helpful in making this appearance of having this metal pavilion structure there, you know. When I see on the right side this Victorian roof, gives me again this motive, you know. It's this architectural remembrance that you had on the railroad station, you know. I like this motive since it's about using architectural details that you have on other areas and other buildings, and since you're now reusing them in a slightly different fashion, you get this remembrance again, you know. Oh gosh, where did I saw that? It kinda reminds me, you know, this feeling. And maybe it's not even conscious, it's subconscious. And you get this remembrance again. I mean, here it's maybe not that apparent because it's in a such close relationship to the railroad station itself. But still, this motive is quite important to know, I think. And can be very effective also in other areas of the park. And the same principle is of course not bound to architecture there. It can be also affected by pretty much everything you sense, you know. If it's something you hear or see or feel, your body will remember that. But yeah, for the rest of the episode, you basically see me now mirroring this whole thing also on the other side. And I'm constructing, of course, this framework underneath the station. And when I was doing that, I had to really fight with those pieces, you know, with those metal pieces. Since I wanted to stay only with metal pieces here, since it's in reality also metal there. But especially when you have like those little arcs and like round ornaments, I think it's just missing right now any pieces there, since you only have like those little rectangular pieces. You can of course scale them down, but still I need them in different forms, and especially also with a roundish shape. Or as I already mentioned a couple of times now, that you have like those art pieces, but with different textures applied to them and also different roughnesses. That means that you may have the same art pieces, but now with a metal finish or with glass finish, you know, just to have this flexibility when building, that you have different materials there and not everything looks like an art piece. So it's this mentality of using art pieces right now, but to make it look in the end like you don't use art pieces. It's a little bit sneaky in a way, you know. And if you look right now under this roof, you know, you have this really semi-gloss there of the art piece, which is, I think, works great there with the usage of this minty green, you know. Since you have everything there in this monotone color, it gets kinda intensified by the lighting of the game and those art pieces, you know. And that's of course great if you strive for a realistic build in the end, to have this lighting. I mean, it's just a game changer. But something I thought also about this color, you know, every time I pick a color from the color picker, I try to, or in general, the colorization of the build itself, I try to keep it relatively desaturized, you know, so that nothing really pops into your eye like crazy and is oversaturated, so that everything has this nice balance, that it's not too colorful, but it's also not too black and white, basically. And this boosts also this realism. In reality, you have, of course, all colors there, but still, it's something, I think it has to do with the natural effect of lighting, how it's physically lit in reality, you know. You always have a certain dust there or some mistiness. And if you reduce this color palette and desaturate it a little bit, you kinda get this same style there, you know. At least I think. For this pavilion structure, I think it's also just the amount of repetition there, you know, that makes this look at the end, because you have the same principle, this static phenomenon, that you have, of course, all those little beams and metalwork there that holds everything together. And you get really this sense of, okay, it's a heavy structure, you know, it's not made out of paper. And because you have so many tiles there, this realism effect kicks in and it just works somehow, you know. So something I discovered when I played around with those round bulb lamps, I changed the color on them drastically later on. I managed to make a lighting out of them that I think is kinda much more pleasant looking and realistic looking when you have night mode there. The only drawback here is that on daylight, the light itself is very looks very dark from the color perspective here. Right now, the only solution I saw was that you could actually use an art piece that's like a round sphere, pull it over this lamp so that you don't see the lamp itself. But this didn't work since because it illuminates the ball itself, and then you have shadow issues and it doesn't look really good. So there we are again, where I hope for another feature they may implement, and that would just be to make different color channels here, to make them independently from each other for the lighting and the visual appearance of the light itself. Then you could do that. And for some reason in the prequel we had that exact thing, you know. Not on all lamps, but on some. But it kinda feels like we move one step forward and 2 steps back, you know. And I mean, it's a little bit funny also for me, but it's really weird because normally you would assume that everything is there from the prequel, you know. It's this natural evolution. And if you then miss, of course, some features that was so essential in the prequel, like for example, just the fact that you can't attach lights to the display sequencer. I mean, that's so essential. I don't know why you would exclude that. Especially since you now have the dark rights in the game. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get again into this monologue of me complaining about those features that should be there, but I'm sure they will work on that over the coming months and hopefully include those features. But yeah, you see me here now layouting or constructing already those little add-ons, I would call them, that are on the right and left entrance or exit, depending how you go through them. And I think they are a nice detail there. And they interrupt this linearity of the station. And just this little extra profile there can make it much more interesting, I think. I mean, it's not only a visual interruption, it's also functional, because the framework underneath this pavilion changes in those areas, The columns get wider apart from each other, and also the area of the roof gets a little bit wider. So I don't think it's only there to emphasize those areas, since they are symmetrical, and on those corners, basically, on those 4 corners on the left and right, and on the 2 corners of the railroad station itself, but also because those points are those knots where people entrance and exit the railroad station, and therefore it makes sense to pull those columns a little bit away so that those people can flow into this area much better then. So something I see is that the train itself is just resting there, and when constructing this canopy, I had to make sure that the train itself would fit under it, so that it doesn't collide with the canopy itself. And actually it's quite interesting, because in architecture or in any literature about that, they speak about this profile, There's a certain profile, or the silhouette has to basically fit everywhere where the train passes by, so that you can be extra sure that the train doesn't collide with anything there. In reality, I would be pretty sure that you couldn't allow that when you have an actual train there, because it's just too close to that. But we have a different kind of rule set maybe also in the park, that you can't apply completely to the world we are living. You can of course do here certain things that you cannot in the public space, When you think about that a little bit, you figure out that in architecture there are 3 types of how you define space in our world, You have public space, then you have semi-public space, and then you have private space. So I would call that Disneyland in its whole, it's actually, in the gray zone between private and semi-public space, because, it gets closed whenever the owner of it decides to do so. And therefore it's a little bit like a school or something, where it's open for the public, but it gets closed if the property owner decides to do so. So there are of course international laws and norms that gets applied to everything there is in the park, or that gets built in it, that they have to follow that. But still, I'm certain that there are certain things where they can completely do it in their own way, and where they don't have anybody telling them in how to do certain things, If you take a look on Anaheim, you are of course limited by the space there is around the park, or let's say the lack of space there is. Since the park is of course located in Anaheim, and where 90% or 95% is only residential area, with so many people living there. And of course you can't buy this land now and suddenly place your park expansions there, like we could maybe in our game here. But I think there is much more freedom in Orlando, since you now don't have to worry about that. That's exactly what happened then also, because you have now not only Disney World, you now suddenly have those other areas, those resorts and Animal Kingdom and everything around this specific area, where you not only have one theme park but a couple of them, and they perform this little colony, And that's also what happened in Paris later on, where you have not only now your park or your 2 parks, but around it you have many different hotels that are also designated, where then the guests that visit your park sleep there. And this whole resort idea about that, And I think that you can take away so much useful stuff here and ideas to learn from this real world experience like it is in real life, and implement those things in your own theme park or resort park in Planet Coaster 2. And that's also why I think, for instance, Wilderness Springs, the park from Aston Wolf, which was recently featured even by the Frontier stream itself about the newest update. I mean, it makes so much sense to make a resort, right? Where you not only have now your theme park, but you have also a designated area where your people can sleep there and stay for multiple days. So they not only go there for one day, they of course go maybe even for a whole week. I think you can get so much into that because you not only have to think now about your park in general, what your attractions are and so on, but also the idea, where's my resort or how it's layouted, how much spatial space is there in between, you know, how far away certain areas are in relationship to some other areas, and where is this public space where people drive from the highway to my park. And you know, you can invent there so many things that you can build upon, and it really generates this inner creative motor in you to start thinking about those things. And I think that's so valuable about this game in general. You know, it goes beyond the game itself because it educates you then to be creative, and you learn how to be creative within the tools of the game itself. And that's the thing I like so much about having a park like the one from Aston Wolf, that shows you not only now a theme park, but shows you this another dimension of having this whole theme park experience with a resort, a theme park, and how they are connected within the world itself, you know. And you can take so much value out of that, I think. If you want, of course. I mean, you have to have this intrinsic motivation in you that you want to learn and create those things. And then I think you can grow beyond yourself. And you know, that's maybe something I have learned over the years. I don't want to sound pathetic here, but I mean, I play piano for 13 years. And I know there are, of course, up and downs, you know, where you go from one situation where you think you are good to another situation where you think you are absolute terrible and as shit as you can be. And I learned this process of learning, you know, that if you try hard enough, if you stick on it with enough capacity and force of your own will, then you can achieve pretty much everything you want in life. I don't think it's a matter of talent, it's just hard work, you know. You have to stay disciplined and just enjoy this whole experience, then it's not work anymore. Again, it sounds pathetic, but I think you have to go through a kind of path of suffering, of constant self-doubt. But if you manage some way to stay focused on yourself and on this self-improvement over the time and this constant learning phase of what you are doing and this deliberate thing, you know, everything I do, I question myself there. And this reflection, I think, is the reason why certain things work in the end, you know. It's the acceptance of making mistakes and then to learn out of them to make it right in the end. And I think if you learned that at some point, then you can do everything. Of course, there will be naysayers in your life that will say that you can do this and that. I experienced that a lot in my life, but if you stay hard enough there and just think about yourself, what you want to do in your life, then I think you make the right decision in the end. So if you are in such a kind of state right now, I want to deeply encourage you to stick with it and to just keep on going strong there. And it's just a little bit a motivational speech, I think, because I know how difficult that can be if you don't really have anybody there that knows how you feel, right? But just stick to it, and I'm sure you will master this time and go through this time victorious. Okay, I don't want to get too melodramatic today, but I can't hide that, okay? It's just there in me, because this project already is so much bound to my heart already, and it was the same thing with Anaheim. It's just a part of me, I don't know, where I have to kind of express my emotional feelings. And maybe it even has a positive effect or influence, or I don't know what it may be on you, that you are watching this video. And therefore, I just wanted to thank you another time, because I saw recently that we reached 1,000 subs here on YouTube. And not only for me, it's a great achievement. I think for our common project here, it's a great milestone that we reached that. And it will mean that in the future, I can make more content, not only in this park, but also in the Anaheim Park, and that we constantly attract more people out there so that they also get into this journey with us to enjoy this common project of ours and see this park built in this video game. So when I see now where we are right now in the footage, we are of course now on this infamous sign in front of the railroad station. It says Magic Kingdom. And for the construction of it, I used of course again our beloved metal pieces there, and just laid a art piece there as a background. And then I used of course now our amazing helpful text tool there to make those infamous words. The question was how to get this 3D effect, because in reality you have those gilded 3D letters, and of course you can't make that here in Planet Coaster 2, maybe in upcoming updates, but really I don't think, because they are so complex in their shape and how they are modeled. So I used this basic technique where you lay multiple layers of text there and make it in different colors, and then you get this little shadow effect or this little border around this text. But I could imagine, and we are again at the stage where I present a new idea about a coming feature that's probably not coming into the game. But anyway, if you could have like this little feature, this little text feature, where you can make a text into 3D space, so you can extrude it out and maybe even have this option of making it beveled or in a different material where it's gilded or something like that, then you can of course make something like this much more realistic looking. Have much more flexibility there also to use it as something completely different. But yeah, maybe they will implement that. Not too sure about that. On this sign, I actually used now this sign element also, not really as a text sign, but just use like those lines there. And I think especially since you have those very thin lines, you can make that only with those text elements, I think. And I even used now like this question symbol and like those exclamation marks there to make those little ornaments. And I think if you invest the time there, I think you can make it even more beautiful and great looking. I can imagine on other details on the main street we use this feature probably a lot, since it's very easy to construct basically. You don't have to bother about the 3D space, it's just a 2D plane and you can place it there. But in general, if you came from the first game, I can't thank Frontier enough for giving us this feature, you know. It was such a struggle in the first game to make signs properly, you know. Even on the most basic buildings, where you have to create some kind of text sign there, it was such a struggle to fit this entire sign somewhere to hide it, and that you only saw the font on the sign itself. So you had always to keep in mind the size of the sign. I mean, you were dependent on the size, since you could not scale anything there, and had to hope that it was roughly in the same scale like in reality. I mean, it's just such a game changer now with having this feature and now even having the scale option. But this brings me, of course, to this new mentality in the game. Because you now have this scale option, you kinda enter a new dimension on detail, you know. You don't have this limitation anymore that you can scale something. That was always the limitation in Planet Coaster 1. Because of that, it was, for me at least, very easy to remember each item there is and to always think about which piece might fit best in each scenario I was encountering. And here it's a slightly different story then, because it will open much more doors on how to construct something in different methods, but it also increases now the detail, the level of detail quite tremendously. I believe if you don't be a little bit aware of that. I mean, on the backside of the railway station, you have the perfect example where I go completely nuts there on the floor. So I have to kind of force myself on other areas that are not so important to lower that level of detail a little bit, I would say. So as you can see now, we made now this little pavilion in front of the station. And those lamps, by the way, are so great, I think. And they really fit nice within this sign. And I think it looks pretty gorgeous now. So this will conclude today's episode. We talked a lot about this pavilion and many other different things. And a little motivational speech also. And I can't wait for the next episode. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, subscribe, like or comment. Join our Discord server. Watch my other videos about Anaheim or Orlando, and thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.